Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the book of 2 Corinthians. We're in chapter 2. Today we're looking at verses 12 and 13. Now these verses, Paul has talked about that he is on his way to visit them in Corinth. It's interesting as you look at Paul's travel plans. You remember in chapter 1 he had told him my original plan, I was going to come visit you in Corinth in southern Greece. Then I was going to go to Macedonia in northern Greece to visit them. And then I was going to return to you in Corinth in southern Greece, and then I was going to leave there to head back to Jerusalem. That had been his original plan. That plan had changed. That's why in chapter 1 some questioned his word, whether he kept changing his mind, and he had to sort of defend his integrity. So now he says, I'm planning on going to Macedonia first, and then come to see you. He just sort of reversed the plans. That was because of that painful visit he talked about. But now he's on the way, but before he goes to Macedonia, he first goes to Troas. That's in verses 12 and 13. That's what Paul says. Now, when I went to Troas to preach the gospel of Christ, and I found that the Lord had opened a door for me, but I still had no peace of mind, because I did not find my brother Titus there. So I said goodbye to them and went on to Macedonia. So when he writes this letter, he's in Macedonia. He's already left Ephesus. He's in Macedonia, northern Greece, but he had first gone to Troas. So he left Ephesus and traveled northward up the western coast of Asia Minor, which is today Turkey, until he came to the port city of Troas. He found the door was open for gospel ministry there, and he worked there for a time, establishing a great church. And then he said, I went on to Macedonia. Even though I was reluctant to leave Troas, I went ahead to Macedonia because I had not yet heard from Titus. It seems that he had sent Titus back to Corinth in the meantime, after that second painful visit, to see how things were going. He's expecting to meet Titus on the journey. He thought he'd meet him in Troas, but he did not. And so he's concerned, so he goes over to Macedonia, still hoping to meet Titus coming back from Corinth with word of how things are going in that church in Corinth. But notice he says in Troas he had a great ministry. Now, Troas is an interesting incident in the life of the Apostle Paul. We see it mentioned 3 times. The first time we saw it mentioned was in Acts chapter 16, verses 6 through 10. This was on Paul's second missionary journey, when he's in the city of Troas and he has a vision. Remember that famous dream he had at night, that vision of the man of Macedonia saying, come over here and help us? Paul knew that was the leading of the Spirit to go to Macedonia, northern Greece, and begin the ministry there. That was on the second journey. That was in Troas. And now in Acts chapter 20, verses 1 through 6, he also talks about a second visit to Troas, and this is the one he mentions in 2 Corinthians. He has left Ephesus, and he stops in Troas and engages in ministry there, as talked about in Acts 20, verses 1 through 6. Now, after he left Troas, he went to Macedonia, stayed for a few months, and then he traveled south to the city of Corinth. And we know that he's going to visit Troas one more time. In Acts 20, verse 7 through 12, it tells us this. On the way back from Corinth, he goes back to Macedonia, and then he crosses over to Troas. And in verses 7 through 12 of chapter 20, he speaks to the church there. This was the church that had been established on that visit before. We have a most interesting account in Acts 20, verses 7 through 12 of a miracle that occurred. You remember Paul gathers the church together, and it says he talked to them all night long. They were meeting in an upstairs room of a house, and he went on, it says, and there was a young man named Eutychus who was sitting in a window listening to Paul preach and teach, and he fell asleep. We still have that happen today. Sometimes people fall asleep in church. Well, Eutychus fell asleep, but unfortunately he fell out the window. They're on the second floor. He falls to the ground, and the church rushes down, and he's dead. And then Paul prays over him, and he is resurrected. Just like Lazarus in the Gospel of John, the Lord restores life to Eutychus. And then they all go back upstairs, and Peter continues preaching and finishing his sermon. But that occurs in the city of Troas. So a lot of interesting things happened in Troas. That Paul received the vision of the man of Macedonia, come over and help us. Paul established a great church there on his second visit, and on his third and last visit, he has this miracle of resurrection. A lot of powerful ministry in Troas occurred under the ministry of Paul. But what it tells us in 2 Corinthians is that I went there hoping to meet Titus, and even though I had a great ministry, I felt the need to go over to Macedonia, northern Greece, still looking to meet Titus. Now later in the book of 2 Corinthians, he will tell us that he does meet Titus there, who has encouraging words. But Paul is in northern Macedonia, northern Greece, that is, in Macedonia, and he's writing this letter of 2 Corinthians, letting them know, I'm on the way. I'll be there soon to visit you again. Join us tomorrow as we continue our 5-minute Bible study in the book of 2 Corinthians.